Hi guys, and welcome back. I'm gonna give people probably just one more minute to hop on since it's almost 10 o'clock, and then we will get started. So just hang tight and we will get started in a minute. All right, let's get started. So today we're going to be featuring our red-eared slider, which is actually a relatively new species to our center, and we'll talk about her when she comes out. But for those of you that are new to this, my name is Shelby. I'm the education coordinator here at the Concord Audubon Center, or the McLean Center, if you will. And our overall mission here at New Hampshire Audubon is to protect New Hampshire's environment for wildlife and for people. And we do that through lots of different pieces of the organization, but my specialty is education. So here at Audubon, we have education programs where we can go to schools, schools can come to us and do field trips, really fun activities where they can see live animals up close and personal. We have a summer camp that we run pretty much all summer long. And then we have our ambassador animals that live here, which is why you're here. So we have been doing these live Q&As every Thursday with a different animal every week. My turtle is escaping the box, hang on. So we've been doing this live Q&A every week and with a different animal. Last week you got to see the ball pythons at the Massapequa Center, which was pretty cool. So we're going to try to rotate until we run out of animals, or hopefully the world will kind of go back to normal. So, and then you can come visit all of them here at our center. So, yeah, that is kind of the gist. And today we're going to see a red-eared slider. And she has a tendency to pee, and she just did. So, welcome to your first live. So this turtle actually has a kind of a special story. She is new to our center, and I'm not sure if you can see how large she is, but she's a relatively large turtle. So if I just hold her up like this and put my hand up to her, she is bigger than my hand. So she is a relatively large turtle. She actually, I know in the past we have talked about how we don't give any of them names or anything like that. This turtle, being a little bit special, she does have a name. She is named Shelly, the turtle. And she is actually a turtle that comes from the Russell Elementary School in Rumney, New Hampshire. When all of this craziness with COVID-19 started, the teacher reached out to me and asked if we would be able to take her. She was one of the classroom pets there. Or ambassador animals at their school. So he reached out and asked if we could take care of her while this craziness was going on. And she actually lives at our newfound center in the summertime. So in the summer, she lives up in Hebron at our center up there for the summertime. But for the time being, she's here living with us and kind of hanging out with the other turtles. So she is a new species for us. We don't have any other red-eared sliders here at our center. These guys are not native to New Hampshire, so they're more of a southern turtle. But she lives here with us. I do not know how old she is, unfortunately. She's a relatively large turtle, like I said, so she's probably up in the older side, because when they start, they're about this big, so probably the size of like a quarter or a little bit bigger, and then they grow, and this is a relatively large turtle. So, yeah, the way we can do this, if you have questions, just drop them down in the comment box, and I can answer them as I go. So yeah, if you have questions, drop those now. But otherwise, what can I tell you about this turtle? So I said I'm not sure how old she is, just because she isn't a turtle that frequents our center. Our newfound employees could probably tell us how old she is, but for now we'll just assume she's relatively old. And I keep calling it a she, and the way we know that it's a male or a female is by the underside of their shell. So if you missed our turtle talk last time, then the females actually have a completely flat shell, and the males typically have an indent in the underside of their shell. So we can see she has a very flat shell, and she is a female. And the females actually tend to be a little bit bigger in the red-eared slider species. So this is a relatively large turtle. Somebody says, how big can they get? So turtles are always growing, just like snakes. They grow. They don't grow like a significant amount where you're like seeing it every day, but they do. They grow just like a tiny bit, and they shed we call them scutes. So these pieces on the backs of their shell are what we call these scutes, and they kind of, I guess, shed off, if you will, where they kind of come off in big chunks, and or I guess they should come off in a big segment here, and that is kind of indicative of them growing. So they kind of get too big for their shell. They kind of gets a little tight in there, so their shell is growing. So I mean, they're always growing for however long that they live. Are they good swimmers? Yeah, so these guys, they are strictly an aquatic turtle, which means that they like to hang out in freshwater ponds, swamps, marshes. It's rare that they're gonna hang out in like fast moving bodies of water, just because that's not really the habitat that they like. But so they're gonna be found in kind of like bigger bodies of water that are kind of still freshwater, and they have these webbed feet that we can see here if she lets us, that have some claws on them. So she's designed to be really good at swimming. Good question. Are there red-eared markings are red? Yes, so if you can kind of see it here. She's kind of tucking her head in, but she does have quite the markings on the side of her head that are red, and that is how they get their name, the red-eared slider, because they look like they have red ears. Let's see. So these turtles can actually live upwards of like 50 years in the wild. So they can live not as long as like our oldest turtles, right? So some turtles can live to be over 100 years old. These guys can live for like 50 years, and in captivity they can live a little bit longer, just because they don't have to worry about food and things. Somebody says, are they endangered? So these guys are native to like the southern USA, so places like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, that area down there. They are pretty abundant. I would say that these guys are like the painted turtles of New Hampshire. So I don't believe they are endangered. So there are plenty of them in the wild, and they're very similar to our painted turtles. And they look relatively similar to our painted turtles as well, with the coloration on the underside of their shell and on their hands and on their head and things. What do they eat? So these guys are strictly omnivores, which means that they're eating plants and animals, or plants and meat, if you will. So things that they're eating in the wild are like aquatic vegetation that is growing in ponds and swamps and things. The plant material that they're going to eat in there is really nutritious for them. They might eat some like berries and things that grow down the pond, and then they're going to eat things like the water bugs on top. They're going to eat the little larvae that are swimming around in the pond. They might eat a fish, like a little small fish, maybe some tadpoles. So there's lots of different variety of things that they're going to eat. in the wild, and they actually don't have any teeth. Sometimes people don't realize that they don't have any teeth. We'll see if we could get her to open her mouth for you there. So they have kind of like a beak. So similar to what a bird has, it has kind of just these sharp little edges along the edge of their beak that they use to kind of rip things apart. And their beaks are really sharp. So if you've ever been bit by a turtle, you know that it is pretty painful because it is pretty sharp. Do they make good pets? So this is one of the most common turtles that people have as pets. Just in like doing research, the first thing that comes up is how to take care of a red-eared slider in the wild or in captivity. So yes, I believe they do make good pets. If you find one in the wild, it's best to just leave it in the wild. But if you do make the decision to get a turtle as a pet, just know that they can live for a really long time and they take lots of work to take care of them, but they do make good pets. Yeah, if you have all the right equipment and everything you need. Where did that turtle come from? So this turtle, if you missed it in the very beginning, this turtle is a turtle that came from the Russell Elementary School in Rumney, New Hampshire. So the teacher reached out to me and asked if we could take care of her while their school was closed. In the summertime, she actually goes up to Newfound, our Newfound Center up there in Hebron, and she stays there for the summer as an ambassador animal for them, and then goes back to school in the summertime, or in the wintertime. But until then, until school is back up and running, she will be hanging out here with us, and she has been exploring all kinds of she's been outside in our courtyard, kind of just walking around and exploring, and she's been exploring in this room, so I think she's really enjoying it here for now. How many square inches of tank per inch of turtle do you need? That is a good question. So I don't know if I would know the exact like measurements, but this turtle has a relatively large tank, so let me show you in comparison to our turtles. So these guys are relatively smaller, but this is a pretty good sized tank. And then over here, this is her tank, so it's much longer, probably the same width, but she has lots of different surfaces to climb up on and get out of the water and bask in the nice lights she has here. So I would say the bigger the tank you can give the turtle, the better. So they can have enough room to swim around and kind of act as if they were out in the wild where they would have plenty of room to swim around. Does it have a backbone? Yeah, so let me put her down and I'll grab my model turtle over here. So this is a alligator snapping turtle shell. So this is a really good shower of the backbone. So a lot of people think that turtles are kind of like, here, we'll let the turtle wander around for a minute while we talk. So a lot of people think that turtles are like hermit crabs, where they can come out of their shell if they get too big for it. But really turtles are connected to their shell, and their shell acts as their backbone. So if you look here on the inside, you can see this is where the spine would be, so all the little vertebrae would be connected there, and you can kind of see where they would have been. So the shell is really their backbone, and that is what keeps them connected. Without their shell, they probably wouldn't be living, and that's why it's really important to watch out for turtles when you are driving, because you can crush their shell and they could potentially get really hurt. So yeah, their shell is their backbone. Really great question. Somebody says, how long do they live? So these guys can live upwards of like 50 years. They, in captivity, they can live a little bit longer just because they don't have to worry about something potentially trying to eat it, or, you know, not being able to find enough food. So these guys eat Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so 3 times a week, and they get plenty of variety of fruits and veggies and worms. So they eat mealworms. They eat red wigglers, which is something that they would typically find in the wild. Sometimes they eat some little beetles. So they're getting an abundance of food and lots of different varieties of food here in captivity, so we know that they're gonna hopefully live a really long life. And if there's something wrong with them, one of the really awesome things is that we have a vet that specializes in, I guess you could say, like rare animals. So he specializes in like birds of prey, so he takes care of all of our birds that live here. He checks out all of our snakes, all of our turtles and everyone. So we have a really awesome vet that if something happens to these guys, we could take him and he'll check them out and make sure that they're all healthy. So hopefully they will live a really long life. What is the right balance of water to swim in versus places to bask out of the water? So you want to ensure that they have at least one area to bask in where they can get fully out of the water. So somewhere that they're not touching the water, they're fully out of the water where they can get dry and kind of bask in the light. The different lights that they need the UV bulbs that give them some nutrients, and they need a heating lamp so that they can get the warmth in the sun and things like that. So an area or two that they can get out of the water and bask in the sun, if you will. But then plenty of other spaces to swim around. We have a couple like floating things so they can go underneath it and also still get on top of it and get out of the water. So there's lots of different options for finding the right turtle aquarium. How do native turtles spend the winter? That's a really good question. So in New Hampshire, we have a bunch of turtles that spend their winters here or live out the winter. So they, our aquatic turtles, will actually dig or swim down to the bottom and kind of dig into the mud where they don't fully hibernate, but what they do is they kind of become like inactive. So their body temperature, because these guys are cold-blooded animals, which means that their body takes on whatever temperature it is outside. So if it's freezing cold, the water is going to be pretty cold, so the turtle is going to be pretty cold. And they, so their body temperature gets really cold, and their, what's the word I'm looking for? Their, what am I looking for here? So their body temperature lowers, and everything kind of slows down. So their heart rate slows down, their metabolism, there we go. Their metabolism slows down, so they're not burning fat as quickly as they would if they were out and about and swimming around. So in the wintertime, they kind of become inactive, and they do still like breathe and everything, and they're alive. They're just kind of inactive because it's so cold that their body is so cold. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Do they have any predators? They do. So these guys, or pretty much, I would say a lot of turtles in general have pretty much the same predators. So things like raccoons, otters, mink, fisher, those types of mammals are actually going to try to prey on these guys, especially their eggs. So red-eared sliders lay between 5 and 20 eggs per clutch, and they can lay 2 to 3 clutches per season. So they lay a relatively good amount of turtle eggs, but there's lots of things that like to eat turtle eggs. So things like raccoons and otters, those guys will actually try to eat the eggs and potentially even the turtle. So we have one turtle here, which maybe you'll see in a couple weeks. I might feature him next, who was attacked by an otter. And you'll get to see his disability, if you will, although he doesn't really act like he has anything wrong with him. So you'll see him in a couple weeks, but he is one of our specialer turtles that actually has a injury, if you will. Can turtles live in the same tank with the fish in a home? I don't see why not. I guess it would depend on like what kind of fish it was or what kind of turtle it was, and if the tank was big enough. I would consult like your local pet store or something. They would probably know best what would go well together. What else can I tell you about this guy? So she is what we call a solitary turtle, which means that she pretty much spends her whole life alone. And when I say alone, I don't mean like totally alone. She's probably living in a tank, in a pond or a stream or something with other turtles, but they're not like interacting really, and so they're not something that mates for life. So when these guys mate, they find a male turtle and they'll mate, and she'll lay her eggs, and her turtle babies will kind of go and live off their life. She doesn't really take care of them. So reptiles and amphibians typically are a species where they put all their energy into laying a lot of eggs and having a lot of babies, and hoping that a bunch of them survive, where mammals kind of do the opposite, where they only have a couple babies and they put all their energy into making sure that the two survive, 2 or 3. So they are solitary, where they don't mate for life or anything, but they lay their eggs, and that's kind of what they do. Somebody asked how old this turtle is. So I am unsure how old this turtle is. She came to us the beginning of March from the Russell Elementary School in Rumney, New Hampshire. So she's a turtle that has been at their school for a while as an ambassador animal, and she goes to Newfound in the summertime. So our center up there would probably know how old she is, but I didn't get any info with her when she came, so I'm not 100% sure. But I would say she's probably relatively older, because she is a larger turtle. So the turtles are always growing, which means that they're, shedding their scutes. So these chunks here on their shell are what we call scutes, and they are kind of always coming off as they're growing, because they kind of grow out of their shell, and their shell grows with them. So I would say she's a relatively large, or a relatively older turtle, because she is relatively larger. I'll see if I can hold her up. Typically when I hold her up like this, she pees, so bear with me. So you could see my hand. I have small hands, so this might not be a good indication, but she's larger than my hand. So she's a pretty large turtle in comparison to our painted turtles, who I think are pretty small. So when the teacher reached out to me, he said, I have a red-eared slider, can you take her, take care of her while we're out of school? I said yes. She arrived, and I was like, whoa, that is a big turtle. I was kind of expecting a small turtle like our painted turtles, but she's really awesome. She's actually really sweet, as sweet as a turtle can get, I guess, if you will. But I think she makes a great addition for now, until she can go back to school and continue doing what she's doing there. Ooh, somebody says they have a 20-year-old red-eared slider. That's awesome. Did you get her did you get them when they were a little baby and you've had them for 20 years? Or did you just recently acquire them? I never knew they were called scoots. Yeah, really cool. I don't think I have it readily available. I have one of our painted turtles actually shed her entire top of her shell in one piece, so all the scoots came off and we laminated it. It's actually really cool to see, but I don't have it readily available. So maybe I'll post a picture of it after this is over. I'll either put it in the comment section, or I will make a new post for it so you guys can check it out. It's really cool. What else do you guys want to know? Do you have any other questions? Are you wondering about anything about this turtle? Oh, okay, so here's the story on the turtle. Yes, I got him, Ertl, I like that, in middle school, and I am now 31. That's awesome. I love that. So Sarah can attest to how long these turtles live and how much of a commitment they are to have these guys as pets. Does she like to be held and interacted with? I like to think yes, so I can only imagine that coming from an elementary school, she probably gets handled and interacted with a lot by some young kids. So here she's really cool. It's funny, she's like holding my hand right now. She's pretty cool with hanging out, and I would say she's a lot more calm than our painted turtles when we do this. So yeah, I think she likes to be held and interacted with. I think she gets to a point probably where she's done, and she'll probably tell us when that time is, but otherwise I think she's pretty happy. Let's see. I don't think I missed any questions. So let's see. If you guys have any last questions, drop them in the comment box and I'll answer some last minute questions, but otherwise, I'm really happy that you guys tuned in. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and you will continue tuning in. I will say there is a link to our donation page in the title there. It's definitely not required. It's just a suggestion so we can keep doing these fun things. If you guys like them, feel free to like our page, subscribe to any of the newsletters and anything that we send out so you can guys stay in the know as we continue on through this crazy time. Do they all have distinctive stripes like that? Yeah, so the painted turtles and the red-eared sliders typically have these stripes, so kind of black and white stripes, black and yellow, sorry, stripes on their arms and their legs and their head. And then on their shell, they typically have this yellow underside with these black spots, which is kind of special to red-eared sliders. And then they each have their own kind of pattern to them. So, yeah. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Feel free to share this post and share any other cool knowledge that you have with us as we continue on through this time. So I will see you guys next week. Thank you. Bye.